Hey guys, wanted to make a quick video on headlines. James asked me to put this together. So it pulled from a bunch of different resources and try to give you the best of the best in just a few minutes here. So most important thing is that your headline is specific. Vague is bad. I'm gonna say that again. Vague is bad. Last time, vague is bad. It is the death of every headline. If your headline is vague, it is not interesting, it causes no emotional reaction, and nobody wants to read it. So an example of vague would be understanding coffee. It's so vague. There's so many ways you could go with that. So that's just a terrible headline. And so sales and marketing, or better sales and marketing, terrible headline. And it covers so much ground and way too generic. If you remember back, if any of you guys, a lot of you probably went to college, when they said, hey, make your topic of your paper more narrow. Really what we're looking for here, you don't want to use the same academic vocabulary, but the same idea of make it narrow, make it really specific when you can. So vague is very bad. Consider why you're interested in this story. So maybe the story was about how to sell better. Maybe that's what the whole entire story was about. But in there, they just dropped it and said, yeah, we actually helped Amazon have better business sales. Maybe they just dropped that in there and kept talking. Well, now you can use that for your headline because you were like, oh, wow, this was the group that worked with Amazon. And that's something that you're interested about. Drop that in the headline. Say, learn from the guy who taught Amazon how to sell better. Or, 4 ways to sell better from an Amazon partner. Something like that, because that was the interesting part to you. It's probably the interesting part to somebody else. Reverse engineer who you're talking to. So when you say, oh, okay, this article is for CEOs, this article is for mid-level managers, this article is for sales reps, it really helps you tweak and make that headline more specific. So maybe what you talked about was the general idea of this entire podcast was about emotional safety in the workplace. Well, emotional safety in the workplace is pretty stinking vague. But if you know, well, this was really directed at mid-level managers, that's really who this was shooting for. Well, now you have a way to tailor that. So you could say 4 ways leaders can help their employees feel safe in the workplace. Boom, you've made it specific now. You've put 4 ways to do it in there. And also, you've made it specific to leaders. And that kind of does a lot of things. A, it gives people psychological buy-in when they think they're in the in crowd. Also, it helps make it specific to leaders, making it less vague, which is, again, vague is really, really bad. So the more specific you can make it, the better. So always remember to just go ahead and take and say, like, okay, who is this podcast or this blog article ultimately for? It's chances are it's not for everyone. Chances are we work with B2B clients, which is already pretty niche. But then you go even further than that, it's probably for sales or marketing or people in tech or IT professionals, probably one of those categories. And then if you take it another layer, it's probably typically for someone in one of those levels, either at the top level or the bottom level or the mid level, somewhere in the corporate ladder. And so if you just putting those in, now you've got it really, really specific just there. And so then you can play with the wording to, you have to tighten up the words, but that'll really help you get started there. Make sure it's easy to understand. Don't use a bunch of confusing vocabulary that you wouldn't use in everyday life. I don't really see a lot of that, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. It should lead to reaction. I do see this sometimes. This kind of goes back to the vague thing, but it's one of the problems with vague is it causes nothing. When you say safety in the workplace or how to have safety in the workplace, of course, everyone thinks there should be safety in the workplace. And I'm just going to gloss over that because I don't have any reaction to agree, to disagree, to be excited, to be interested, to be happy about it, to be mad about it. You want some sort of reaction. You want people to basically read it and have to stop and be like, do I agree with that? Do I disagree with that? Does that make me feel good? Does that make me feel bad? What do I do with this? It should do something to people. So if it doesn't cause any reaction at all, then it's probably a bad headline, frankly. Try to make it actionable when you can. So how to do something, or 4 ways to accomplish, or 9 ideas those kind of things will really, really help your article pop, but also help your headline pop. And so they may not have spelled that out in the podcast. They may not have said, today we're going to talk about 3 ways to execute an ABM campaign, but throughout the podcast, they gave 3 ways to execute an ABM campaign. So you can just say that. You don't have to hear them directly say the words 3 ways to execute an ABM campaign. You can just go ahead and say, today you can just make the headline centered around that. If there's someone interesting that was mentioned in the podcast, again, if like Amazon was mentioned, Elon Musk or something, and it had to do with the podcast at all, and you can creatively make it relate to the podcast and the general theme, go ahead. Take some creativity there. And it can be an off-the-wall comment, but then just tie it back into the overall theme and you'll be fine. Okay, so there you go. So I'm just going to go over a quick example of good and bad. How to make your employees